When Milena Kovacic left Hospital Snow Vicente in the freezing cold morning of June 23, 1998, no one imagined that it would be the last time anyone would see her alive. The clock in the main lobby read exactly 2:15 a.m. when the 28-year-old nurse walked through the automatic glass doors, carrying her brown leather bag and wearing the crisp, white uniform she always wore during her night shifts in the cardiology ward. The temperature in Ribera Preto that winter morning was close to 12, an unusual cold spell for the region that left the air dry and biting. Milena pulled her navy blue coat over her shoulders as she walked through the dimly lit hospital parking lot, her footsteps echoing on the asphalt, damp from the light drizzle that had fallen throughout the night. It was a routine that Milena had been repeating religiously for over 5 years, always leaving at the same time, always following the same route to her Volkswagen T Branca. The apartment in the Jardín, California neighborhood was just 15 minutes from the hospital, a route that Milena knew by heart even in the dark. She had chosen that location specifically because of its proximity to work. Her neighbors were used to seeing her arrive at the same time each day, politely greeting the night porter before heading up to the 5th floor. On the morning of June 24, when Milena failed to show up for her shift that started at 7 a.m., her colleagues initially thought she might be sick. Milena never missed work without notice. The head nurse, Mrs. Cansecu, decided to call Milena's apartment at 8 o'clock in the morning. The phone rang repeatedly with no answer. The concern turned into alarm when Cansecu managed to contact the building superintendent, who agreed to check the apartment. The apartment was exactly as Milena had left it the morning before. The bed was made. There were no signs that she had slept there. The bag she always carried was not in the apartment, nor were her house and car keys. It was when they checked the garage that the situation became alarming. Milena's white face was not in its usual place. The car had simply disappeared along with its owner, leaving only unanswered questions. It was as if Milena Kovacic had evaporated into the cold June dawn. If you re-enjoying this mystery, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to discover more intriguing cases like this. Milena Kovacic was a petite woman, standing approximately 160 centimeters tall. Her dark brown hair was always kept tied up while working, and she had expressive brown eyes that her colleagues described as warm. A small scar above his left eyebrow was one of his most distinguishing features. The daughter of Croatian immigrants who arrived in Brazil in the 1960s, Milena had grown up hearing stories about her parents' homeland. His father, Ivo Kovacic, worked as a welder in a metalworks in Bauru, and his mother, Ina Kovacic, was a seamstress. Milena had graduated in nursing from the University of São Paulo 5 years earlier, moving to Ribera Preto after getting the job at the hospital. She was a determined young woman who sent money to her parents monthly and maintained a rigorous routine that included going to the gym 3 times a week and visits to the Orthodox Church on Sundays. Milena spoke Portuguese perfectly, but kept the Croatian language alive at home with her parents, participating in the small local Croatian community. At Hospital Snow Vicente, Milena was respected by colleagues and patients. I worked mainly in the cardiology ward, caring for patients with serious heart problems. His patience and dedication were legendary. Dr. Roberto Mendes, the chief cardiologist, always praised her work, saying that she had a great way with people. Among her closest colleagues was Fernanda Oliveira, who had worked in the same sector for 3 years. Fernanda described Milena as a reserved but loyal and trustworthy person. She had never seen Milena drink beyond the occasional glass of wine, and had never seen her show romantic interest in anyone. At 28, Milena had never had a known serious relationship. When asked about this, she always replied that she was focused on her career. Her colleagues occasionally tried to introduce her to single doctors, but Milena always politely declined. During night shifts, Milena often worked alone in the cardiology ward with just one assistant. She was known for making extra rounds during the early morning hours, personally checking on each patient. This extra dedication meant he worked more hours than required, but he never complained. Among the regular patients was Senra Geraldo Ferreira, a 73-year-old man who has been hospitalized multiple times in the last 2 years due to chronic heart problems. Geraldo always specifically asked for Milena's care, saying she was the only nurse who truly understood his needs. He was a widower, lived alone in the center of Ribeirão Preto, and had no children or close family. Another well-known patient was João Batista Silva, a 45-year-old businessman who had suffered a heart attack months earlier. João was undergoing outpatient treatment, but frequently returned for checkups. He was married, had 2 teenage children, and owned a transport company. He was always grateful for Milena's care and occasionally sent flowers to the hospital. There was also Dr. André Castello, a 35-year-old cardiologist who had started working at the hospital months before the disappearance. André was recently divorced and had moved from São Paulo looking for a new beginning. Some colleagues noticed that André showed particular interest in Milena, often finding excuses to talk to her and occasionally inviting her out for coffee. One figure who would become central to the investigation was Marcos Pereira, a medical equipment maintenance technician. Marcos, 41, had been married for 15 years, but his marriage had been struggling in the months before he disappeared. He had been seen several times in the hallways during the early hours of the morning, claiming to be checking equipment. Staff noted that she always found reasons to visit the cardiology ward during Milena's night shifts. Jose Cardoso, a 58-year-old night watchman who had been employed for over 10 years, worked in the parking lot. Jose had known Milena since she started at the hospital and always greeted her cordially. In the last few weeks before her disappearance, he noticed that Milena seemed more tense, frequently looking around as she walked through the parking lot. The first clues emerged when police began their investigation 48 hours after Milena was reported missing. The white Parati was found abandoned on a rural road 20 kilometers north of Ribeirão Preto, in an isolated area surrounded by sugarcane plantations. The car was locked, with no signs of a struggle, but no clues as to Milena's whereabouts. Inside the vehicle, investigators found Milena's purse containing her wallet with intact documents and cash, totaling 230 reals, her house keys, makeup products, and a notebook with information about medications for her patients. There were no signs of a planned escape. One intriguing discovery was a crumpled business card from a psychology clinic in the glove compartment. The card belonged to Dr. Luciana Rodriguez. When asked, he confirmed that Milena had appointed a week after the disappearance, but did not provide details, citing professional secrecy. Another important clue emerged when examining Milena's phone records. In the 2 weeks prior to her disappearance, she had received several calls from an unidentified number, always during the early hours of the morning, between 2 and 3 a.m. The calls lasted only seconds. When police traced the number, they discovered it belonged to a public telephone in downtown Ribeirão Preto. Fernanda revealed that in recent months Milena had mentioned feeling watched, especially on her way home. Milena never specifically identified who was following her, but said she sometimes noticed the same car appearing repeatedly, always keeping a safe distance. Described the vehicle as a dark sedan. The clues are piling up, but the mystery remains. If you're trying to solve this case with me, leave your theory in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The official investigation was led by Chief Antonio Rebelo, a 47-year-old experienced police officer. Rebelo approached the case methodically, starting by questioning everyone who had had contact with Milena in the previous weeks. Forensic resources in 1998 were limited. The research relied primarily on traditional fieldwork and extensive interviews. The first line of investigation focused on Milana's family. Ivo and Ana Kovacic were extensively interviewed in Baru, as were their siblings Marco and Petra. Everyone demonstrated full cooperation and provided solid alibis. A family offered a 5,000 reals reward for information. The Croatian community mobilized to help in the search. The second line focused on coworkers. Dr. Roberto Mendes was questioned about possible professional conflicts, denied any problem, and reaffirmed that Milana was an exemplary employee. All other doctors and nurses were interviewed, and their statements were consistent. When investigators focused on Dr. Andre Castello, some inconsistencies appeared. Initially, Andre claimed that his relationship with Milana was strictly professional, but when confronted with testimonies from other employees, he admitted to having tried to ask her out several times. Andre provided an alibi for the night of his disappearance, claiming to be at home, but there was no one to corroborate. Marcos Pereira's investigation revealed worrying information. Marcos tried to minimize his presence at the hospital during the early hours, but records showed he had been there almost every night Milana worked for the past 2 months. When confronted, he admitted to having developed an obsession with Milana, but insisted that he never tried to hurt her. Marcos revealed that he was going through a severe marital crisis and had found in Milana a fantasy escape. He admitted to having observed Milana through the windows and discovered her daily routine. He provided an alibi claiming to be at home discussing divorce with his wife, but she initially refused to confirm this. A significant discovery came when examining Marcus's phone history. They discovered that he had made several calls to the hospital during the early hours of the morning, each time hanging up quickly. When confronted, he admitted that sometimes he called just to hear Milana's voice when she answered the ward phone. The investigation of the patients also brought revelations. Mr. Giraldo initially appeared cooperative, but investigators noticed nervousness. When asked about his feelings for Milana, he admitted to having developed a paternal affection, as he had no children and felt alone since his wife's death. A shocking revelation came from João Batista Silva. During questioning, he initially denied having a personal relationship other than a professional one with Milana. However, when investigators examined his company's financial records, they discovered unusual cash withdrawals in recent months. When confronted, João admitted to having developed feelings for Milana during his recovery. He revealed that he had begun sending anonymous gifts, including flowers, chocolates, and small pieces of jewelry, through delivery services. João admitted to hiring a private detective to discover Milana's routine, including photographs taken without her knowledge. A family's parallel investigation brought additional insights. Ivo and Ana hired their own detective, Roberto Damasceno, who focused on the possibility that Milana had left the city voluntarily. Damasceno discovered that Milana had withdrawn a small amount a week earlier, but not enough to suggest a planned escape. He also discovered that she had bought a new cell phone 2 weeks earlier, a fact she had not mentioned to anyone. Community investigation yielded several leads. Residents of Jardin, California, reported seeing a dark sedan driving around in previous weeks, always during the early hours of the morning. Several people described the vehicle as a black or dark blue Chevrolet Monza, but no one wrote down the license plate. An important witness was Donna Maria Fernandez, a 65-year-old woman who lived next door to Milana. Donna Maria had chronic insomnia and often watched the movement on the street. He reported seeing the dark sedan parked several times with someone inside, but was never able to see it clearly due to the distance and inadequate lighting. Pressure from local media intensified after the first week without results. The newspaper Diario de Ribera published daily articles speculating about motives, and questioning the effectiveness of the investigation. Regional television also covered the case, interviewing colleagues and members of the Croatian community. One of the most promising leads came from a truck driver, Sebastian Rodriguez, who claimed to have seen a woman matching Milena's description at the bus station the morning after she disappeared. Sebastian said the woman seemed nervous and was carrying a small suitcase, but he couldn't confirm for sure that it was her. After 3 weeks of intensive investigation, the case reached an impasse. All major leads had been investigated. All suspects had been questioned multiple times, and there was insufficient physical evidence to formally charge. The investigation was expanded to neighboring cities, but also produced no results. The official investigation was gradually scaled down after 6 months of no progress. The case remained officially open, but hope for a quick resolution had disappeared. There were sporadic reports of people claiming to have seen Milena in different cities, but none proved to be true. The years passed slowly for the Kavadet family. Ivo and Ana never stopped searching, but gradually they had to accept the possibility that they might never find out what had happened. They kept the apartment for 2 years, but were eventually forced to vacate it due to financial difficulties. It was only in 2011, 13 years after the disappearance, that the truth finally came to light. Sir Geraldo Ferreira, now 86 years old, was hospitalized at the same Snow Vicente hospital in a terminal condition. Knowing he had little time left to live, he asked to speak to a priest and requested that the police be called because he had something important to confess. When the investigator arrived at the hospital, Geraldo was visibly weak, but mentally lucid. With a trembling voice, he began to tell a shocking story. Geraldo revealed that he knew exactly what had happened to Milena because he had been responsible for her death. The confession revealed an unhealthy obsession that had grown over the 2 years Milena cared for him. He had developed feelings that went beyond the normal gratitude of a patient. Geraldo admitted that he began to fantasize about having Milena as his own daughter or companion, filling the void left by his wife's death. Geraldo revealed that he was the one who made the anonymous calls to Milena during the early hours of the morning. Always hanging up because I didn't have the courage to speak outside the hospital environment. He also admitted to having hired someone to follow Milena and discover her routine. The dark sedan that several people reported was driven by an acquaintance, who he had paid to watch Milena. On the night of her disappearance, Geraldo was waiting for Milena in the parking lot. He had planned to approach her and confess his feelings, asking her to consider living with him as an adopted daughter. He was desperate for solitude and genuinely believed he could offer Milena a better life. When Milena left the hospital, Geraldo approached her near the car. Initially, Milena was surprised, but she maintained her professional education. It was when Geraldo began to express his feelings in his bizarre proposal that Milena realized something was wrong. Milena tried to politely decline and explained that she couldn't have that kind of relationship with a patient, but Geraldo became agitated and insistent. When Milena tried to get into the car, Geraldo grabbed her arm, begging her not to leave him alone. The situation escalated when Milena tried to free herself, and Geraldo, in agitation and desperation, grabbed her tighter. Milena started screaming for help, which left Geraldo in a panic. In his desperation to silence her screams, Geraldo placed his hands over her mouth. Geraldo insisted he never intended to hurt her, but in his advanced age and altered emotional state, he applied more pressure than he intended. Milena struggled for a few minutes, but eventually stopped moving. When Geraldo realized she was no longer breathing, he went into total shock. In a panic, Geraldo placed Milena's body in the back seat of his own car. He drove to the rural area where the car was later found, a place he knew because he had grown up in that area. Geraldo buried the body in a shallow grave he dug with his own hands. After burying Milena, she returned to the hospital and moved her car to the same rural area. He cleaned the inside of his own vehicle and returned home, where he spent the next few days in shock and denial. Geraldo revealed that he had lived with guilt and remorse all these years, often considering confessing, but always losing his courage. Said her health had deteriorated rapidly, in part due to the psychological stress of carrying the secret. Only now, facing imminent death, did he find the courage to tell the truth. With Geraldo's information, the police located the exact place where Milena had been buried. The remains were exhumed and identified through dental records and DNA, confirming that they were those of Milena Kavadet. The discovery brought painful but necessary closure to his family. Geraldo died 3 days after making his confession. Police concluded that although he had caused Milena's death, he had probably not intended to kill her, and that it was more likely a case of manslaughter resulting from his desperate attempt to silence her screams. And so another mystery is solved. If you managed to discover the truth before the revelation, tell us in the comments. If you liked this story, click like, right where you are listening to us from, and subscribe to the channel by activating the bell. See you in the next mystery on our channel. Milena Kavakik's case serves as a reminder of how loneliness and obsession can drive seemingly harmless people to commit terrible acts. For the family, the discovery brought a mixture of relief and renewed grief. They finally knew what had happened, but they had to confront the brutal reality of his death. Milena's memory was honored with a commemorative plaque in the cardiology ward, recognizing her exemplary dedication to patient care.